maybe when you left your child in a huff of anger, that's what they're left with. And so unless you go back and change that may linger with them and have some residual challenges. And so modeling that behavior for them, because when they're little, you're always asking them, hey, go, fix whatever, go apologize to your brother that you hit, stuff like that. So you have to model that as an adult too, or they think it's just a one-way street just for kids.
Welcome to the Dad Central Show, hosted by At.Joe Jr. and Drew Solon. We know dads want to see their kids succeed, but they don't always know how to get there. This show gives dads the tools they need to raise confident and successful kids.
What is up, everybody? At.Joe Jr. of Dad Central, along with
Drew Solon of Dad Central.
Aha. He knows who he is. He knows who he is. And we are here today on the Dad Central Show, which is sponsored by Dove Men Plus Care. Dove Men Plus Care believes that care is the best of a man. And because when men care for themselves and others, there's a positive impact. Drew, what's been going on?
Well, I've just had another baby. So we've got 5 kids in the family. And it is a lot. It's a lot to manage. But there's some really cool and fun things that you see out of your kids, the older kids, when a baby comes into the world. And so it's been fun going through that experience, tiring for sure. And a reminder that you have to really adapt as a dad. One of the key things that you think I'd learned that by now, but for some reason, I guess it's been a while, 7 years since we'd had a baby. So to have a baby 7 years later, it's almost like I forgot. So that's been good though. So in the thick of that, what's going on with you?
Well, you know what? Before we go any further, I want to shout out Allison Schaefer.
Yes.
Because Allison Schaefer recently invited us to one of her IG lives, and we had such a spectacular time. And we really appreciate her taking the time out of her positive, productive schedule to have us on. I thought it was a great conversation, really enjoyed it. So if you go to Allison Schaefer on Instagram, you can catch Drew and myself chopping it up with Allison we were talking specifically about social media and young people based on the event we recently attended that was put on by Dove. But I want to just shout her out and fatherhood journey. Yeah, it's interesting. My dad just celebrated a birthday, and I took him. I can't remember the name of the restaurant, but he had. I don't want to put up my phone, but he had a huge plate of ribs and chicken, and man, the guy demolished 90% of it. I go, man, I can't even eat that much in one sitting. So it was really, 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 really crazy, and I guess an interesting father story. I was chatting with one of his friends recently, and he said, you know what? Your dad can't express how much he loves you and that you've been there for him, and he's just happy to have you around. He says that to me directly, but coming from one of his friends that he's known for 70 years, that was quite a special moment. So it was quite cool, and continuing to be a father figure for this gentleman who's 40 years old. A lot is coming at me in regards to being a caregiver, father, etc., all at once. But it's all fun, and I'm learning as much as everyone else is learning. So that's some of the stuff that's going on in my boring life.
Yeah, well, thanks for sharing. I think it just goes to show that no matter what age you are, fatherhood has an impact.
Absolutely.
And that's why we do the show. I'm talking about it.
Absolutely. Speaking about impact, we're getting impact from the Southern United States today. Who do we have on today?
Well, today we're going to be talking with At.Joe Rawlinson, and he is a dad of 4, and he's also an author of 2 books, A Dad's Guide to Twins and Dad's Guide to Raising Twins. He also has a very popular podcast by the name of Dad's Guide to Twins, and I think an even more popular website that is chock full of resources for dads of twins, again, by the same name, Dad's Guide to Twins. And so I'm excited to talk to another twin dad, have him on the show, and be able to get a ton of the insight that's required to be able to manage this sort of challenging task of having multiples. So let's welcome Joe and have a great conversation.
Hashtag twin dad. Let's make it happen. How you doing today, Joe?
I'm doing great. How y'all doing?
Outstanding. Really great to have you here today.
Thanks for having me.
Good. Drew, this is your lane today, baby. Your lane today. You and Joe, rock and roll it.
I don't know about that, but I do have the twin dad experience, so it'd be cool to hear another twin dad's perspective. But Joe, we really love to start by getting a little bit of the backstory, like a little bit of the early years, before he even got to this place of now being, an expert when it comes to supporting dads of twins. So could you just talk to us a little bit more about maybe the early years for Joe Rawlinson, what life was like growing up, maybe even touch on like what it was like experiencing your dad and how that's led to where you are now.
Okay, that's great. Yeah, I'm actually an only child. And so for
Okay.
me to go from having no brothers and sisters to raising four kids who are
Mm.
brothers and sisters has been interesting perspective. But starting back when I was a kid, my dad had a very busy career. He was a physician. And so he was often not at home. So it was my mom and myself after school, or if dad was on call on the weekends. So I really did cherish the time when dad was home, when we can go do things. He was I was in Boy Scouts when I was younger. He was my scoutmaster for a while, so that was fun to go camping with dad. In fact, he realized that he was so busy with work that he started taking me on these campouts before I was actually old enough to go, just so I could spend time with him. So I really do appreciate him kind of maneuvering around his career to make time for me when possible. We moved all over the country because dad was in the Air Force, and so got some perspective living in different parts of the country. So now I haven't really moved at all. I've been in Austin for 20 plus years. So it's been kind of the opposite. Enjoy staying put right now where we are.
What were some of the characteristics that your dad instilled in you that you carry on today?
I think he was a very hard worker, obviously. And I observed that. And then I tried to use that in my own life. I intentionally did not choose a career in medicine because I thought he worked too much, but I realized that him giving his all in his work has served me well as I've done that in my career and the projects that I've worked on. I also know that he loves my mom, without end, and I appreciated that respect that he showed to her in the home and the partnership that they had in raising me. And so I always try to, show my wife as much respect and love as possible because I saw that modeled for me as I was growing up.
Wonderful. Drew?
Yeah, thanks for sharing that last part because I think that's so important, especially as children are growing, to observe that in the parental relationship that they're experiencing. And so I'm wondering if you'd be willing to do a little bit deeper, maybe upon reflection or even what it was like at the time. Like what did seeing that do for you while you were growing up?
Well, I never had to worry about my parents, well, at least at my young innocent self, never thinking that anything would ever go wrong with their marriage or our family, because things seem to be humming along pretty well. Now, if they hid stuff from me behind doors, I don't know, but we seem to have a pretty peaceful existence in the home. My mom had health struggles, and my dad, was always there to help take care of her on the home front, and that really showed that regardless of the challenges that people may have physically, that the love still endures, and you're willing to sacrifice whatever it is to make sure that the person you love is taken care of, and everything happens as it should.
I want to go a little bit deeper into that. When you were growing up, was that common with the friends' parents that you hung out with?
Well, yeah, like I go over to a friend's house and I would see how their parents interact, or friends that had parents that were getting divorced, things of that nature. I think that I don't know. I felt like I was kind of in my own little bubble with my family, and didn't really think that kind of stuff would happen because I didn't observe any of that in my house. So I think my parents, I think they did a great job creating that kind of peace and harmony in the home. Which isn't, now that I'm a parent, realize it isn't always possible to always do that, but that's the kind of environment that they created for me growing up, which I do appreciate.
Blessings to your parents, sir. Blessings to your parents. Drew?
Yeah, well, maybe we can fast forward then. So you had that great example growing up, those two important parts that you described for us. Let's look at your journey to becoming a dad then. Can you talk about that? Like, what were the hopes? What were the fears? What were even the challenges that came up as you became a dad for the first time?
Okay. I graduated from college. I moved down here to Austin, Texas, and ended up meeting my now wife through a friend, and we kind of did a long distance courtship. And then we got married. We were excited to get married and to start a family right away. And we had some issues with fertility in the beginning, several miscarriages, which were just heartbreaking at the time because we wanted so much to have children in our family. Fortunately, after a couple of years of going through that and trying, we were able to have our first son. And so it's just a huge relief and blessing that the pregnancy was successful and he was born healthy. So we'd been married a couple of years when our first son was born, and then we were just kind of thrown right into it. The pregnancy was smooth, but the delivery had some complications. We were hoping for kind of a natural birth, and my wife ended up having an emergency C-section after 24 hours of labor, and so that didn't quite go as we had pictured. But being new parents, we were kind of naive as far as what to expect. But he was born healthy, and then we were off to the races. After that, we ended up having three more kids in the next 3 years. So it was pretty quickly we grew our family from there.
Well, I can imagine the first part what you shared, going through loss before actually having your family start could be challenging. But then also growing a family as rapidly as you said. So 4 children under the age of 3. Actually, this is going to be almost like so what was harder? Experiencing that grief and loss early on, or navigating the challenges of now having this burgeoning family kind of thrust upon you so quickly?
Well, I think there are different types of burdens, right? One is a very heavy emotional burden, which you physically manifest that burden. But at its core, it's an emotional, mental burden with the loss and the miscarriage. But then the raising a house of extremely young children, like you mentioned, we had when our twins were born, we had 4 ages 3 and younger, and so 3 out of the 4 were still in diapers, and it was just a very crazy, hectic season of life where you're constantly on the go, taking care of somebody all the time, and so it's just sheer physical exhaustion, which then affects your mental and your emotional well-being too, simply because you're constantly in demand physically to do something all the time.
Joe, first of all, I love hearing stories of victory. So really happy to hear that I came out on the winning side. And I just want to sorry for the challenges you went through, but I'm celebrating with you with the victory you had. I have a conversation piece here in regards to, especially those early years. How did you manage?
Well, first, I have an amazing wife. I couldn't have.
There you go.
We got to give credit where credit is due. So, I was working full time. She was a stay-at-home mom of all of our kids in the beginning, and she was homeschooling our kids in those early years. So I was away from home during work. So as far as juggling responsibilities, when I got home from work, I was all in on the dad duties. So as soon as I came through the door, what can I do? How can I help? And all the way until we go to sleep. And then when the babies were little, there was no sleep. So at night, taking care of the babies as well. I realized when we had the twins, just how spoiled I had been when our boys came one at a time before that, because my wife had breastfed them. So she'd wake up in the night and take care of them. I would sleep, go to work the next day. Now, when the twins came, it was all hands on deck. I was up all night with her, helping bring the kids to her or feeding them with bottles or et cetera. So then I really gained an appreciation of what moms do all the time to nurture and take care of those babies. So again, how did we juggle it all? I think that logistically, we kind of shared the burden. It wasn't like, okay, you're in charge of everything, I'm just going to be hands off. No, there's none of that. It was, what can I do? How can I support you as my wife? What can I do with the kids? And then when we went to having twins, for the first several months with twins, we had someone come live with us, like a my brother-in-law, my sister-in-law, my mother-in-law, somebody. So we had a third set of hands to help take care of somebody, either our toddler boys or help take care of the babies. That helped ease some of the burden a little bit, but it wasn't easy. I mean, the one thing that we realized is that because they were so close together in age, we had kind of seasons of insanity where everybody was in diapers and everybody was potty trained and everybody was doing this. And so once we got through those milestones, we're like, hey, we don't have to ever do that again because we're done with that phase. So it was nice to hit the milestones, see the light at the end of the tunnel, and evolve over time.
Thanks.
Yeah. Well, I just heard, the potential for a tremendous amount of maybe stress or pressure when, you're thinking, now I've got this big family and I've got to provide for them. You are the sole income earner. You are responsible to ensure that everyone could have their physical needs met. Could you talk about what stresses or pressures you were maybe feeling and how did you kind of work through those? Because I think that's I just had our fifth, and so baby was born 4 weeks ago, and I think about, man, exponentially how much more and providing. And so I'm just curious if you could talk about what the pressures you felt and how you navigate that.
Well, I knew when we had the two boys one at a time, I knew how much of a burden that was already on my wife. So when it came time to decide to have number three, it took a little longer for us to decide to do that. Of course, God knew better. He's like, okay, we're going to send you two because if you struggle this long, just decide on three. We're going to send you 3 and 4 at the same time. But right. it was. So I knew kind of the physical demands that was on my wife already. And then, of course, when we find out we're having twins, I'm racing all the things of is our house big enough? Do we need a new car? Do we have to move? How am I going to pay for all of these things? And my mind was already jumping ahead to, college for 4 and weddings for everybody. It's just, which is, in retrospect, kind of irrational to think you have to worry about stuff so far in the future. But it was that I kind of stressed out about a lot of those things in the beginning. And then I did take some relief in focusing on what was right in front of me, what I can control, what was outside of my control, trying to push that off or ignore that for now, and focusing on the things that were easily within reach or things that I could actually do, that I could prepare for, that I could control. So I kind of looked at each of those concerns, just realistically one at a time. Our house, for example, we're in the same house we were in when my wife and I got married. So we fit everybody in the house. It's a tight squeeze now that we've got big teenagers, some of whom are bigger than myself. And it's just, but we've made it work. And so I think we've always kind of found solutions that are, it's going to work. It's good enough. And from our kids' perspective, they don't know any better. This is just how they've been raised. It's just natural for them to share rooms, share a bathroom. I mean, it's no big deal. When in the beginning, I was thinking, oh, we got to buy a much bigger house. As far as career and finance stuff went, I was more cognizant of how we managed our budget, how we can squeeze the most out of what we are doing. That started by getting, we got a Costco membership. It's like we're going to buy tons and tons of diapers and formula and all that stuff. We're going to buy in bulk and save some money that way. But I felt like my employer at the time was very flexible when it came time for paternity leave, or if I needed time off to go help with the kids or take someone to a doctor's appointment, stuff like that. So I felt really blessed in that regard to have a kind of a flexible employer and a good boss. So it was just a matter of taking what came, figuring out trying to solve the problem. I went to college and as a computer engineer. So I always think of stuff like, how do I solve this as an engineer, as a problem solver? So kind of applied some of that same mindset to the fatherhood and parenting.
Interesting. How important was it? How important, if you look now, going back, was that paternity leave?
How important was the leave after the kids were born?
Yeah.
When I look at our firstborn son, where I was just adjusting to being a dad, period. I had no idea what I was doing. I thought that was huge to be able to bond with my baby and be there with my baby and my wife in the beginning as our family started. I thought that was a huge blessing. I had 2 weeks off of work, which is kind of standard here in the States anyway. When it came time for the twins, by that time I realized, okay, maybe if I can get some more flexibility. So when the girls were born, I took off the first week after they were born, And then, like I mentioned earlier, we had some people come stay with some family members stay with us. So then I just kind of delayed the second half of my paternity leave until all the help was gone. So once my wife was going to be left alone, I was like, okay, then I'll do the rest of my paternity leave. And then I actually did like half days at work. My boss was flexible enough to say, okay, yeah, you come in the morning and then you can go home in the afternoon. So I kind of stretched out farther than it would have been otherwise. So that was kind of a good transition, I guess, from my wife being home alone with 2 to now home alone with 4. But like I said, she did amazing with that.
Drew?
Well, obviously you've been able to navigate, the challenges of, that earlier years. But now if we're looking at what you're doing, you've been actually helping others who have had twins for a while as well. So maybe you can talk to us a little bit about the journey to turning your lived experience into something that could maybe add value for others. How did that happen? And like, what were you thinking when you got started doing that?
Sure. When we found out that we were having twins, of course, it was a total shock to us. I learned later that identical twins, which is what we have, are just completely random. So it doesn't matter if it runs in your family or not. It was a total shock to us. So as normal, I'm like, okay, let's go search for information to help me as a dad prepare for my twins. And everything I found was, whether it's websites or books, was by moms, for moms, talking to moms. Now, yes, there are some overlapping principles and stuff that were helpful, but to see that there was nothing specifically for dads of twins was kind of disheartening, or that we were relegated to a paragraph or two, or a subsection of a chapter at the back of the book was kind of like, okay, I think we could do better than that. So I would started out with me just documenting kind of my journey as we went along, and that seemed to resonate. People started finding the blog, and ultimately, I wrote a book that's done great for dads that are expecting twins, and now dads that are raising twins. Ultimately, the podcast, I was always listening to podcasts from the early days of podcasting. And so I thought, well, why don't I do a podcast for dads of twins too? So that's been a great way to connect with dads. I've interviewed dads all over the world that are fathers of twins so they can share their experiences. And it helped me realize that, we all have very different experiences and journeys when bringing twins into the family. And so it's been fun to see how they overcame their challenges and how that can be inspirational to other dads as they're coming along the path behind us. So at first it was kind of me seeing kind of a gap in what information was out there. How can I turn around and help other dads? Because there wasn't much for me when I found out that we were having our girls. So it's been great to be able to put that out there. I've run dadsguidetotwins.com now for 14 plus years.
Wow.
The podcast has been out there for 11 years. So it's been a long time. So now I've got dads coming full circle that discovered me when they were expecting, and now they're guests on the podcast talking about their toddler twins. It's just a fun way to see, the cycle just keep on going.
Did you ever expect it to become what it is now when you first started out?
I didn't. I had no idea. I had created other websites in the past for other stuff, and because I've always worked online in one capacity or another. But the way that it resonated with dads, or even it's resonated with the moms. The moms will find my stuff and they'll be like, "Hey, I shared this with my partner." So it's just been amazing. Like I said, dads from all over the world, and helping families. It's just it's crazy to believe that that's the way it's turned out.
Mm. I heard you talk about you all have different experiences. Having heard these stories from across the world, I'm actually wondering, what are some of the common things that as a dad to twins that other twin dads experience? If you could just share some of that.
I'd say the most common challenge would be that there's some kind of complications with your twins where you start with mom being on bed rest. Twins are born early. The twins are already born earlier than just a single baby. Usually like a month before single babies, but twins can be born an extra month early before that or more. So time in the hospital, in the NICU, the neonatal intensive care unit. Lots of parents' challenge is their babies. One or both of their babies are in the NICU for anything from days to months. And so managing your babies are in the hospital, how do you visit them, connect with them, and juggle life outside of that? that's probably the most common challenge is the NICU time. And then, of course, some of the challenges we talked on before, like how do people juggle their careers? How do they decide, like, okay, daycare is insanely expensive for one baby, let alone two babies. Should I, as dad, stay home to take care of the baby? Should my partner, should my wife stay home with the twins? Should we both work? And then most of somebody's salary is going to just pay daycare. So some of those challenges come out as well. So I'd say that's the most common. Then there's like some just crazy things that are out there, that everything from a laser surgery to separate the placenta while the babies are still in the utero to save the baby's lives and mom's life. It's just a miracle of modern medicine that stuff's even possible. To twin dads I've talked to that they had fertility challenges as a couple, so they couldn't have twins themselves. So they've either adopted twins or had surrogates for twins. It's just lots of dads come to be twin dads through lots of different ways. So it's been fun to explore all those stories with them.
Yeah, as a twin dad, some of those early ones you were referencing, the NICU, the neonatal intensive care, just as like it was bringing back. Yeah, that's right. I actually went through that, and then that so those are very relevant actually. But without connecting with other twin dads, I don't have necessarily been able to know that another dad is actually gone through that. And I've always found, as we've been doing this work and connecting with more dads, there's something that almost like connects me to that other dad, having known that they've gone through something that I've gone through. Have you found that? Have you found that experience of hearing other dads' stories, that there's something that almost like creates a little bit of a bond there? And how does that help you, or what are your thoughts on that?
It does. We're kind of in an elite fraternity, right? Of fathers in this unique situation. And so hearing their stories, I realized they're going through the same things that I went through, or different challenges. But at the end of the day, they're still a father. They're still a dad. They love their kiddos. They love their partner, and they're trying to figure it out and do the best that they can. And a lot of their creative solutions to how they solve these problems is just inspiring. All these dads really are involved and caring, and they want to do the best for their families. And so I do feel that connection with them. And oftentimes when they share their stories, I'm like counting my own blessings, like, wow, I'm really glad I didn't have to go through that myself. But I empathize with your situation. I'm glad it's worked out for you. And it usually they come out stronger on the other side of it. Their relationship with their kids is stronger, their relationship with their partner. And if they can go through some of those really hard times in the beginning, it makes other challenges a little easier to overcome, because they say, hey, I did this. I'm sure they can overcome this next challenge.
Yeah.
Yeah, Joe, I want to just jump in for a second. I have a feeling that you've been given the window to so much education through other fathers' journeys. You want to expound on that?
So my education from other fathers of twins. Yes, I think that even though most of the guys that I interview they have twins younger than me, I have interviewed some dads that have twins older than my twins. And so starting with that later group, it's been kind of the light at the end of the tunnel to say, okay, well, your kids, you made it through this whole phase. Your twins are now in college. As I'm going through the teenage years with all my kids right now, thinking, okay, I know we can get through this crazy season and get out on the other side of things. It's also been really interesting to see, like I mentioned, some of the creative solutions that these dads have come up with to solve these problems that either we've experienced ourselves or that we've never had to experience. To realize that where there's a will, there's a way to solve these kind of things. You don't have to just throw up your hands and give up or abdicate your responsibilities as a dad, because you can figure this out. You can solve the problem, or you can plow through it, make your way through it, and come out stronger on the other side of things. So it's been, every time I have these interviews with dads on the podcast, it's just, I come away just completely inspired. I'll go tell my wife right away. I'm like, hey, they had to go through this, this, and this. Isn't that just insane? And but they did it. They figured it out. And so that's very inspirational to me. Like when I have challenges, I'll be like, okay, I can figure this out too, because it doesn't compare. It wasn't life or death like these guys had with their twins or their situation. I can solve this problem.
Are you a dad who feels like you're juggling a million things at once? Balancing work, family, and personal goals can be overwhelming. But what if there was a solution? That's why we created our new fatherhood community called Dad Mentor. For over 20 years, Dad Central has built practical tools to help dads. We understand the challenges you face and provide the support you need to thrive. The biggest complaint we hear from dads is there's no dedicated support for their specific needs. But not anymore. Our new community, called Dad Mentor, is here to transform your fatherhood experience. Imagine feeling in control, staying calm and patient when your children misbehave. Picture yourself connected to your children, guiding them with confidence and watching them succeed. When you join Dad Mentor, you'll have access to a community of like-minded dads committed to their dad journey, just like you. You'll also get the Dad's Roadmap. This is a step-by-step plan to help you go from unsure to unstoppable as a dad. Monthly masterclasses and Q&A sessions. You'll get answers and know exactly what to do straight from experts. Monthly group meetups that connect dads over common topics. A dad's resource library. Curated webinars, podcasts, or guides built by Dad Central to help you grow as a parent. And finally, you'll also get exclusive members-only offers and events. Now, many dads do try to do this fatherhood thing alone, only to find themselves trapped in frustration and strained relationships. Then they may turn to unhealthy coping mechanisms like drugs, alcohol, or other distractions, leaving their family and their own well-being at risk. We don't want you to reach that point of regret. Take steps to invest in you and your family today. Join Dad Mentor and go from stressed, tired, and overwhelmed to confident, calm, and connected. Join us today by going to dadcentral.ca/dads. Well, on that note, I think about the unique element of twins, and I have identical twin daughters as well. They're 10. And one of the things that has always been important to me for them is that they have, two things. One, that they have their own identity, that they're unique in terms of who they're. Yes, they're identical, and they've got that blessing of having a identical twin sister, but they're uniquely them, and that they would have a really strong relationship. That they would be great friends. They would be loving sisters that are not inseparable, but to the point where they really love and support each other. Really important to me. So I'm just curious, as another twin dad, identical daughters, what are your thoughts on that? And then a follow-up question will be, how would you maybe advise a dad on helping support them having their own identity, but then also building a really strong relationship together?
Yeah, I was really worried about them being kind of grouped together always as the twins and not as individuals. And so even when they were babies, my wife and I went to great lengths to kind of make sure they weren't always the same. Like we dressed them differently from the beginning. Primarily that was to help people tell them apart, but it also helped instill that initial difference just at first glance. You can tell that they were different people. We named them, different. We didn't have any kind of rhyming names or anything that would kind of make them easy to be grouped together. And it was always our focus, both my wife and I, to make sure we kind of looked for those unique aspects about each of them. Because even though they were identical, they had different personalities. They did have different quirks, and that's continued all the way to today. And we would focus on their unique characteristics and not try to always force them to do the same thing. So even like with birthdays, we'd have different cakes for each of them, and they can, kind of pick what style or design or whatever they wanted on their cakes instead of having just one thing. Or what might have been convenient for us to just consolidate into one thing or one event, we'd make sure to have separate things for each of them. As far as encouraging their relationship to each other, well, they've always shared a room since they were born. So that's kind of forced them to spend a whole lot of time together. And our house is not that big already, so they've always been around each other. They've been great friends and interacted with each other pretty positively since they were little. Of course, they've had ups and downs, and now they're teenagers. They have some teenage drama between the two of them, but they still have a great time together and they still laugh together and have fun together even now. So I think that focusing on making sure that they are treated as individuals and then encouraging them in what their individual interests may be has really helped foster the individuality as well as the relationship with each other.
Joe, I want to ask, what's the biggest challenge you face as a twin dad, and how have you overcome it?
The biggest challenge has kind of evolved, I guess, over time. In the early years, it was sheerly juggling all of the responsibilities and the physical needs of all the kids that were very young, feeding and diapers and sleeping and naps and all that stuff, which was a physical exhaustion at the time. That has evolved now to how do I make sure my girls are getting the individual, we talked about individual attention, but individual help as they develop into young women, right? How do I focus on getting to know each of my girls better so that I can help them as a dad as they plan school choices, future career choices, all that stuff. That's the age that they're getting into now. And making sure that I have one-on-one time is probably the biggest challenge. When they were little, trying to find one-on-one time with each of the kids when they're all home at the same time, or now as they're older, getting one-on-one time to sit down and talk with them or do some activity with them just to keep that relationship. It's probably the biggest challenge just because of time and logistics.
Mm.
Go ahead, Drew.
Well, Joe, as we're talking, you strike me as a really calm, cool, and collected dad, which with 4 kids, so close in age, and probably unique differences, being young, as you said, the physical exhaustion. What are your maybe tips or guidance to maintain? Well, actually, no. Let me go back. One, how are you able to maintain that calmness, coolness? How valuable or important do you think that is? And then how would you guide somebody in terms of being able to apply some skills to be able to keep that calmness, coolness in the midst of what could sometimes be chaos in the house?
Well, I think when they were, I think keeping their cool is difficult. I think it is essential though as a dad, because your kids are watching everything you do, right? They watch how you interact with them. They watch how you interact with their mother, and so they're going to then draw their conclusions about how they think you feel about them, how they think you feel about your wife, your partner, and ultimately they'll probably replicate that when they're older too. So you're creating the future basically with how you interact with your kids. Now, in the moment, you're not thinking that like, how is this conversation going to affect my kid 20 years from now? But in the moment, I think I was never ashamed to just like walk away from, if there was something really hot that was making me agitated, remove myself from the situation. One thing we did when the kids were really young was if they were doing something bad, whatever that was, we would say, when you act like this, you can't be with us. And we would physically move them away from whatever was causing the trouble to another corner of the room or their room or wherever it was. So taking that own advice myself, like if I'm getting a little too agitated, stepping away to get some perspective on that. I think having a good partner, my wife, we're usually kind of when I'm agitated, she isn't, or vice versa. So we're a pair in that regard, where if I see she's struggling with something, I can step in with the kids in that moment, or vice versa. Has been really helpful. When they're really young and they're just crying and screaming all the time, I'd have to tell myself it's not personal. They don't hate me as a dad. They are just expressing their needs at the time. And so they're not intentionally trying to drive me crazy by keeping me up all night. That's just the physical demands of the time. So trying to put that in perspective of it's not them versus me. It's just the way things are in the moment. And then just dealing with that the best that I can. Now that my kids are all teenagers and can articulate their arguments to me, or that's a little bit of a different spin on things. But there we're able to talk through why they think a certain way, why they want to do something, and then we can talk about the pros and cons and stuff like that, and have that discussion with them. Now the challenge is, letting them make their own choices and realize the consequences of those choices, which may be bigger consequences than when they were toddlers. Now that they're teenagers and or outside of the home doing thing that may have consequences. So definitely try to keep your cool. I mean, myself, I've lost my cool plenty of times. I try to not direct that anger directly at the cause of the anger or the child. I'll go, yell on my pillow or whatever it may be somewhere else. But everybody loses their cool eventually. They just have to try to make sure that you're not coming down full force on your kids, because they're going to take that extremely hard. And then afterwards, if I make a mistake as a dad, I have to man up and I have to go apologize to my kid. I'm sorry I had this outburst. I'm sorry I said those things, or I'm sorry I did whatever it was. Still express my love to them. Talk about how that's not going to change. I still love them. That's probably the hardest thing, is to go to your kid and show that humility, that maybe you made a mistake as an adult.
I know so thank you for that. I'm really good. I think lots of great insight there. That last part you talked about, as you said, it can be the hardest part, but how important do you think that is?
It's the apologizing at the end. Well, I think it closes the loop, right? Maybe when you left your child in a huff of anger, that's what they're left with. And so unless you go back and change that may linger with them, because have some residual challenges. And so I think it's really important to go back in and show your love and your affection to the child that you were interacting with, realizing that, but you're also modeling the pattern of like, oh, okay, when I make a mistake, it's okay to have emotions are normal. It's okay to have those, but you have to go and then make amends or fix whatever you broke, for example. And so modeling that behavior for them, because when they're little, you're always asking them, hey, go, fix whatever, go apologize to your brother that you hit, stuff like that. So you have to model that as an adult too, or they think it's just a one-way street just for kids.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think I agree 100%. I think that's one of the important things that we try and instill in our household too, the concept of repairing a relationship, but also accepting that, we're human, we make mistakes. It's okay to make a mistake, but how you recover or respond from the mistake really lends to, your ability to move forward in a positive way and build a healthy relationship versus maybe an unhealthy relationship. So really well said. Ed, give it over to you.
Yeah, I really want to thank you for saying, amongst all the things, that the importance of what you do now, they may emulate or replicate down the road. I think it's a very, very important point. And especially when there's moments where we're just flying off the handles, we also have to say, you know what? That can leave a lasting impact. That can leave a generational impact on our kids. So I love how you emphasize that. That was really good. I want to ask though, what do you do to get spare time? Because you've got this household that's going all the time. What do you do to, make Joe a better guy, make Joe a better dad?
Well, one thing I like to do in the mornings is I'll go for a walk with my wife. So we try to make time for that as a couple. It's not just getting outside, which is awesome, fresh air, and exercise, but it's able to have a conversation, connect with her, where when we're in the house and all the kids are in the house, it's harder to connect that way. So I think making explicit time on the calendar to do something for yourself or for your partnership, your marriage, is essential. We'll schedule, talking about marriage, like we'll schedule like a date night to get out of the house to go do something, just the two of us as well. As far as time, also for me, I enjoy gardening, so I'll go outside. Then I could think through work stuff or family stuff or whatever it is while I'm outside in the garden in nature, and that's often very rejuvenating for me as well.
Nice.
Love it. Fellow gardener, yes.
We're finally getting to that point in where we are, because actually gardening, get outside, because it's nice. But this is a point that is really important, I believe, as well. And it is that partnership. It is working well together. It is, you referenced earlier, when I'm, maybe not at my best, she's typically better. And when she's not at her best, I'm typically better. Could you talk about how to go about working well with your partner, just based on your experiences or what you've learned from other dads in the process of guiding them through being a more involved dad?
Well, I think we had, it goes way back to when we were dating, and engaged. We talked about all this stuff. Like, how did this work in your family? How did it work in my family?
Mm.
What do we want our family to be like? So a lot of it was hypothetical conversations way back in the day. But then when the rubber meets the road and the kids start to come in our own family, we'd have to have conversations about issues with raising the kids or issues in the household or whatever it may be. I found that it was most helpful to have those conversations not in the moment. Like, let's separate the current emotions of the moment, and then have this conversation maybe when we go on our date night. Let's talk about, our one child and their challenge with X, Y, or Z. What can we do to help them, or what should we, how do we handle that? So kind of separating the heat of the moment, whatever that is, with the, hey, let's talk about this when we're together at this later time. So then the emotions have cooled down and we can think more logically through the stuff and talk about different possible outcomes. I think that's been very helpful for us. Also, like, if she has a strong opinion about something, I have to think like, okay, is it just me wanting to be right, or is it, or am I really right? I guess does it really matter? Maybe a better question. Like, if we go with her suggestion or recommendation, is that fine at the end of the day? Or is it really like a kind of a showstopper issue? And oftentimes, she makes good decisions. They may be different than what I would have done, but the outcome is still okay. And so realizing that your partner, your wife may have, make a choice and just support her in that, realizing that if your decision, although different, the outcome may still end up being the same. Everything's going to be okay. And then like the big issues is when you have to sit down and have conversations around those, ideally when it's not in the heat of the moment. I try my best to support my wife when we're with the family, when we're around the kids. So support her publicly when we have disagreements, talk about those not in front of the kids. So although now that our kids are teenagers, sometimes we can say, hey, this is something our family is trying to decide. What do you think? As teenagers, what would you recommend we do? But you can't really do that when they're super little. But when they get older, they can contribute to those family type of discussions.
I love that. That's a knowledge bomb right there, involving them in the family when you feel it's topic and age appropriate. I think that's a huge one. Again, going back to what you said earlier, what you shared earlier about setting that foundation for the legacy piece. I love that. So I think that was absolutely beautiful, Drew.
Yeah, the ability to like work well, but I also heard things like trust. You said your thought process around how critical is this decision? Do I have to be right, or will it have a negative impact? I think there's an element of building trust in the relationship there, and then being able to work together as a team. And I think the other word I like to use is unity, right? Presenting unity to the children, even though you may have some differences on the back end. I think those are really important principles, and that's what I really heard you sharing. It's like you're working together as a team, you're having trust of each other, and then you're unified when you're presenting with the kids. Yeah, very good, very good. So talk to us about Dad's Guide to Twins. Talk to us about how you help. Talk to us about like your books. What are the things that you have to help dads?
Yeah, so if somebody finds out that they're having twins, they can go straight to dadsguidetotwins.com and find a whole bunch of information that'll help them along their journey. I have written a couple of books. The book called Dad's Guide to Twins really helps you get through the pregnancy, help you get ready for your babies. And my second book, Dad's Guide to Raising Twins, kind of covers those first several years where you're going through some crazy times and milestones with your babies. And if you want to hear experiences from other twin dads as well, like we talked about the podcast on your favorite podcast player, just look for Dad's Guide to Twins. And there's plenty of stories and examples there to help you along your journey.
Good stuff. Well, Drew, anything else?
I just want to say thank you, Joe, for coming on the show, for sharing your experiences. I think there's so much value in just how you describe the process of becoming a dad, the things you're thinking about, and then working together with your partner. Overall, just very valuable, and it's great. It's very clear to see why you and your book and your blog and your podcast have become such a valuable resource, because it's just filled with things you can take and apply right away that build a really positive family environment. So thanks so much.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you, Joe. And again, thanks for everything you have done, past, present, and future. If there's anything that we can help you with in regards to twin dads or dads in general, please feel free to reach out to us. And we always like to say, don't just manage your time, especially with the twins, manage your energy, and remember to give yourself grace.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Have a good day. All right, Drew, another epic conversation there.
I don't know if I need to say much. Joe said it all. He basically laid out key things to do, when to do it, how to do it, and really valued his insight.
I will just add quickly a number of things. That one of the words is trust, and I know that Joe mentioned it, trust between him and his partner, but I think also the trust between him and his children.
Mm.
And a short little story. Many years ago, I don't watch a lot of TV, but I was watching TV one night and The Rock came on, and he was on it was a part of an Oprah's masterclass. And all it was, and I've mentioned this for a long time, but when the word trust came up, when Joe said it, made me think about this. He shared for 1 hour his life. And near the end of it, he at the time this was filmed, he had a young daughter. I think the daughter's name was Simone, correct me if I'm wrong. And one day he said to her, Simone, what do you like about Dad? What do you like about Dad? And she goes, nah, Dad, nah, you're bugging me. You're bugging us. No, he really wanted to know. And she said to him that I trust you. So that made me think about when Joe talked about trust. And I know I feel that there's trust between him and his children. If dads out there can get that trust between them and their children is a huge thing. And when you see him say that, he brings to cry, because he said, when I was 13 years old, I couldn't say that to my parents, but for her at 13 years old to have that relationship with me, it meant the world to him. So just wanted to build on that. So as we finish off, the Dad Central Show is sponsored by Dove Men Plus Care. Dove Men Plus Care believes that care is the best of a man, because when men care for themselves and others, there's a positive impact. A few last things that we want to share with you. Drew, quick share. Dad Mentor.
Yeah. So one of the things that we continue here is the power of community, connecting with like-minded dads, or dads, as we've heard on the show, who share a common experience and can give you some wisdom and insight. So we've got a new community called Dad Mentor, which is bringing dads together to learn step by step, kind of how to go from A to Z of the whole fatherhood journey. And you're in a community format. So we're looking forward to having you check out Dad Mentor, or come and join us as part of the Dad Mentor community, where you're going to be basically going from tired, stressed, overwhelmed, shifting to ultimately being calm, connected dads.
Yeah, calm like Joe, right?
Exactly.
Calm like Joe. So if you want to find out, if you want to touch base with us, please email us at podcast@dadcentral.ca. And we have our podcasts. So check us out at dadcentral.ca/podcast. And always, we have a pile of resources that you can find at our website, dadcentral.ca. As always, remember to give yourself grace. Don't just manage your time, manage your energy, and share the information out, because dads are important. Be well, keep the faith, and don't just manage your time, manage your energy, and give yourself grace. Take care.